January 25th, 1990. A dark, stormy night over the northeastern United States. Avianca Flight 052, a Boeing 707, is inbound from Bogota, Colombia, carrying 158 people. They are tired, cramped, but anxious to land at New York's JFK Airport just minutes away. But the skies over New York are not welcoming. They are a chaotic mess of freezing rain, dense fog, and dangerous wind shear. On the ground, air traffic controllers are overwhelmed, juggling dozens of aircraft in the storm. In the cockpit of Flight 052, a quiet, deadly crisis is unfolding. The fuel gauges are dropping. The plane is running out of time. The journey began 8.5 hours earlier at El Dorado International Airport in Bogota, Colombia. The aircraft, a Boeing 707, was an older but reliable workhorse of international travel. In command was 51-year-old Captain Lariano Caviedes, a veteran pilot with over 16,000 flight hours. In the right seat sat 28-year-old First Officer Mauricio Klotz. Klotz, though relatively new to the 707, was a U.S. citizen and fluent in both Spanish and English. He would be handling all radio communications. The journey across the Caribbean and up the U.S. coast was long but uneventful. But as they approached their destination, the weather system that had been battering the coast all day was at its worst. JFK Airport was reporting dangerously low visibility and wind shear, a sudden, violent change in wind speed and direction that can be catastrophic for a landing aircraft. On the ground, air traffic controllers are overwhelmed, juggling dozens of aircraft in the storm. In the cockpit of Flight 052, a quiet, deadly crisis is unfolding. The fuel gauges are dropping. The plane is running out of time. Air traffic control, struggling to manage the backlog, placed Flight 052 into a series of holding patterns. The first hold was near Atlantic City, New Jersey, for 19 minutes. Then a second hold, further north, for 29 minutes. The crew, watching their fuel rapidly deplete, grew anxious. They had planned for a long flight, but not for this. Finally, after more than an hour of circling, Flight 052 was given vectors toward JFK. But the New York airspace was saturated. The controllers, under immense pressure, put them into another holding pattern, this one over the coast of Long Island, for 29 more minutes. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was fraught. The flight had been in the air for nearly 9 hours. The captain, Caviedes, was acutely aware of his dwindling fuel. He instructed First Officer Klotz to inform ATC of their situation. This is where the chain of survival begins to break. Klotz radioed the controller. His exact words were, "We're running out of fuel. We need priority." In the world of aviation, this simple phrase is fatally ambiguous. To the crew, priority meant they were in trouble. But to the American controllers, priority is just a request to be moved up in the landing sequence. It is not an emergency. The controllers heard the request, but they didn't hear the panic. They didn't hear the magic words that would have cleared the skies for them. Mayday, or fuel emergency. The controller acknowledged the request, but, not understanding the severity, did nothing to expedite their landing. The crew of Avianca Flight 052 was polite, deferential, and followed instructions. They never challenged the controllers, they never escalated their language. They simply waited. After a total of 77 minutes in holding patterns, Flight 052 was finally cleared for an approach to runway 22 left. They were exhausted, low on fuel, and flying into a storm.
As they descended through the thick, wet clouds, the aircraft's automated warning system suddenly blared. Wind shear! Wind shear! Just 500 feet above the ground, the plane was hit by a violent downdraft, its speed dropping dangerously. Captain Cavieres fought the controls, but they were too low and too slow. They had no choice. They had to abort the landing. A go-around requires a massive burst of engine power to climb back to safety. It was the one thing the aircraft could not afford. As they climbed away from the runway, the crew's polite protocol finally shattered. The captain asked Klotz, "Did you tell them we are in an emergency?" Klotz replied, "Yes, sir, I told them." But he hadn't. Not in the language ATC would understand. The controllers, still unaware, gave them new vectors for another approach, but it was too late. One by one, the engines began to die. The cockpit voice recorder captured the horrifying sound. First, engine number 4 flamed out, then engine number 3. The flight engineer frantically tried to restart them, but there was nothing to restart. The tanks were dry. The 200,000-pound Boeing 707 was now a glider, falling silently through the fog. In the last seconds of the flight, First Officer Klotz's voice came over the radio, a final, desperate plea. "Avianca 052, we are running out of fuel. We are... Mayday! Mayday!"
Emergency status requested.
The transmission cuts out. The plane was too low. The controllers radioed back, but there was no reply. At 9:34 p.m., Avianca Flight 052, completely out of fuel, sheared the tops of trees in the wealthy, dark suburb of Cove Neck, Long Island. It slammed into a wooded hillside, missing a house by only 75 feet. The aircraft broke into 3 devastating pieces. The cockpit was obliterated, separating from the fuselage and landing 100 feet away. Miraculously, there was no fire. The empty fuel tanks that had doomed the flight now saved the survivors from an inferno. Local residents and emergency services rushed to the scene, finding a surreal tableau. A silent, dark aircraft with dazed survivors still strapped into their seats, scattered amongst the trees. The rescue was heroic, but the toll was catastrophic. Of the 158 people on board, 73 were dead. All 3 members of the cockpit crew, the captain, the first officer, and the flight engineer, were killed instantly. 85 people, many with serious injuries, had survived.
We have the CBR.
The National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, arrived to a baffling scene. Why did a modern jetliner simply fall from the sky over New York? The answer was found not in the wreckage, but in the black boxes and the radio transcripts. The NTSB final report was a damning indictment of a breakdown in communication. The primary cause of the accident, the flight crew's failure to adequately manage the aircraft's fuel load and their failure to communicate their fuel emergency to air traffic control. But the blame was shared. The NTSB also cited the air traffic controllers' failure to understand the priority message and the poor flow of information between controllers as they handed the plane off. The system had failed the pilots, just as the pilots had failed to use the system. The investigation also highlighted a fatal flaw in cockpit culture known as Crew Resource Management, or CRM. The cockpit of Flight 052 was not a team. It was a steep, rigid hierarchy. The first officer, tasked with communicating, failed to convey the captain's urgent panic in standardized emergency language. The captain, isolated by the language barrier, failed to confirm his message was understood. The tragedy of Avianca Flight 052 was not in vain. It forced a global change in aviation. The ambiguity between priority and emergency was eliminated. Today, Mayday for imminent danger and Pan-Pan for an urgent situation are the universally
Overhead panel,
understood,
fuel pumps engaged.
non-negotiable calls for help.
Confirmed.
Crew resource management training, which teaches pilots to communicate assertively, challenge superiors, and work as a unified team, became mandatory across the industry. Flight 052 did not crash because of a storm or a broken engine. It crashed because of a failure of human communication. A simple, fatal misunderstanding